So I want to go to John Abel. You're still the newer member of the team as the Chief Information Officer, and having been a CIO myself for a long time, I'm curious, how do you decide what is a risk that's really worth a concern? Something you have found structurally at extreme, or something has changed in what the nefarious actors are doing. How do you determine when a risk is big enough that you want to bring it to Ed and to more of the team, and then maybe it gets escalated further? Or do you just go, yeah, it's another one, it's just getting bad out there, and so, yeah, we'll just deal with that. You're not going to make the decision to bring it forward. Can you think how you frame that, and maybe any example of a choice that you've made at some point of what to bring forward or not?
Sure, Brad. And again, thank you for having us, and delighted to be here. So I think, you've mentioned risk here several times. Obviously, it is all about the level of the risk. And so how are you making that assessment is really what you're asking, right? So when am I deciding, hey, let's flag this one up? We, as Ed mentioned, we have that cultural transparency and candor. We have preset meetings. I hold a meeting with the executive staff every month called our IT executive board. That gives me a cadence, and most CIOs sometimes don't have that regular cadence with the executive team. I have a specific set meeting. It's only about IT. I chair the meeting, all the executives, and Ed's been super supportive and is in that meeting. And that gives me an opportunity to bring up, I'll call it kind of like IT advisories, things that you should be aware of, but you probably don't need to be, we've got it under control and here's what's going on. Then there's the things that will happen. And if there is an incident, a breach or anything like that, there's a certain list of criteria. As a experienced CIO, I know that needs to go straight up, to Ed's point. And I would have no problem. It would be a text message to Ed directly and say, we're having a problem, we're doing this, and I'll be back to you. That's the kind of speed of resilience that you need when you have a cybersecurity. And the criteria that kind of comes into that is, first and foremost, is there a customer impact? Do we have something that is going to be impacting our customers? Have we breached any data of our customers? Has something happened around our customers? And so, because that's very important to any enterprise, but here at Extreme, we take that extremely seriously. Are there any laws or rules like PII data on our employees or something like that we have breached or broken or has become exposed? And so again, that is a significant, what we would call a critical incident, and that would be moved up. And then you get into some things like around our IP. There's been some exposure. Mm-hmm. So those are some examples of the types of things that I would consider significant risks when one of those types of things are exposed or has become breached. Then definitely that needs to be what we would we classify every incident. When an incident is classed as critical, it automatically goes straight to the executive team. And usually with that, I will write something up with enough information in it and say, Ed, if you want me to get in front of the board. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a regular cadence with the executive team. And then what we've instituted here, as John kind of alluded to, every 6 months now, we have a deep dive on cybersecurity with the board, myself and my chief information security officer. And usually we bring out, if there's no critical incidents that we have to go do a deep dive on, and we haven't had one of those, I will use those as educational opportunities to understand where our risk profile is going and what our risk profile is as a company, and where kind of the industry is going. And so we'll bring in outside speakers, sometimes maybe our audit partners, or the FBI is always willing to do that, Department of Homeland Security, things like that. So.
Yeah, I think those are so important in being able to categorize what is really a risk to the enterprise. And you point out, customers would be an immediate trigger, certain sorts of reportable data, an immediate trigger to know when to escalate. So I'm going to start again with you, John Abel, and then work our way back up. How much money do you spend on risk mitigation? Because as a CIO, it's bottomless. It's just endless. You buy another technical thingy, a cloud subscription, 2 more security analysts. How do you go about deciding and taking to Ed and say, I think we need more investment in a risk mitigation. Then I'm going to ask you, Ed, how you would process that trade-off. And then John, whether you worry whether you're spending enough or too much on this. And we'll do this a little bit as a lightning round. So John, how do you decide when to go for more resources to try to go after a risk mitigation?
So there are obviously benchmarks, Brad, out there, Gartner statistics on how much you should be spending as a percent of total IT spend or percentage of revenue on various things. And cybersecurity is one of those that has actually been increasing. I would say that we are gradually increasing that. How I get that is you assess on a regular basis, like with an independent body, as to where are our biggest risks, what are the areas that we need to be investing in to mitigate those biggest risks. But as you know, being a CIO yourself, there's always more demand than there is supply. And so if you have those independent assessments and you can say, hey, you know what, we are good and we are good enough. You will never be perfect, and you really don't want to be perfect. Right. It's really about, hey, I'm in the 80th percentile or 90th percentile on all the risk categories that I'm monitoring. And if you're below that or you're falling behind, because it's always moving and you have to stay up with it. If there's any risk profile that you're regressing on, that's where you need to be thinking about.
So one of the things, yeah, I think I hear you say is if you're going to take a request forward, you do want to have some benchmark.
Correct.
And knowing where you're at in that band, and rather than just saying, you know, Ed, we need 5 more cybersecurity professionals just because I thought so. You're having some sort of a benchmark. So Ed, I know you get spending requests and investment requests from all across. They're always competing for the same dollar. How can you decide when, yeah, we're going to spend some more on cybersecurity because maybe it's worth it versus it's just kind of a gut wrench. You worry if you're wasting your money.
And well, you know what? I think the first things, it starts with people. You got to have a high quality CIO and CISO. So you know that we have, and so that allows me to sleep knowing that we have sort of the quality and the experience of a team of professionals that understand the risks and understand how to mitigate risk. First of all, the third party assessment is important, right? We need to have a third party come in again with real honest feedback about, you know, where we have exposure. And as John mentioned, you know, there are many different segments, vectors, if you will, around security. And so we're not trying to get to 100% because there's no such thing. The target is constantly moving, and it's a question of where we have to invest to stay in the acceptable range. Because it's, you know, as I said before, we were talking, it's asymptotic. You'll never get there to perfection, but you want to be up, you know, kind of over 80% on all the different points, or security vectors, if you will. And so it's a question of just constantly managing this moving target. And that's how we think about it. We don't want to be exposed. We know we'll never be 100%, and we balance, where we are. One other thing I would add to what John was saying before in terms of how we interact. As the CEO of the company, I'm the number one target. More people go after me than anyone else. And it's not just that they're going after me, they go to the rest of the company from me. So all the phishing attacks where people are asking for money, where I'm the one asking for money, or through SMS texting, smishing attacks, where people over the weekend, a couple weekends ago, were getting text messages from me asking for information. And so as these come up in real time, I'm brought into the know in real time. And then, you know, there's a dialogue and a communication around that.
And maybe to echo Brad, one thing I would just add on there is that, you know, culturally, again, to open with what Ed said, culturally as a CIO, you want a CEO and executive team that actually treats cybersecurity as a real thing. I've worked at other companies where IT in general, and included cybersecurity, has been pushed so far down in the organization. You can't get that cadence with the executive team. They really don't care. And when there is an incident, they're like, how come you weren't watching? It's like, well, how come you didn't care until now there's an incident? And that is so important. And so the fact that Ed himself and the entire executive team do take an interest, and we have that board level presence, goes a long way to making the role of the CIO and where to invest and not to invest so much easier.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And so many firms, particularly smaller, if you look at small, medium enterprises across the whole of the nation, are struggling so mightily with this topic because it seems so overwhelming, lack of the depth that John talked about on the board to know what to do. So I will go to Mr. Chairman here. John, in the end, how do you know if you're spending enough or you're spending too much and wasting it on cybersecurity?
First of all, at a board level, we need to trust in the management team and admit that we don't have enough detail to be able to make that kind of a judgment. So I'll just plagiarize what Ed said, which is you got to have a really good CEO. And you got to trust in that judgment. And then when they come to you and say, we got an issue and we've got to add some spending, we've got to hire some more people, you respect his judgment and support what he feels needs to get done. I would say that to John's point, one of the other boards I served on was Sonequal. I was the chairman of the board there, and that's sort of security appliance, phishing, all this kind of stuff. That was the business, deep packet inspection, et cetera. So I had a lot of background observing in different companies, to all your points, how so many times IT gets stuffed down and pushed aside as a especially weird world, and the board's kind of above it. And so they don't really understand it. They don't want to get involved in it. And that is not how we see it here. Our response and approach as a board is to become as knowledgeable as we can, recognizing that it is a key strategic plank for the company. It cuts across every function. It cuts across our ability to implement our strategy, as well as our, obviously the public image. So we are involved as an integral part of our processes, and we will have a candid, honest, direct conversation if we hit a major issue. And again, I would emphasize that I think we're very flexible and responsive when an issue occurs. It doesn't go to a bureaucratic, we'll form a committee and come back and see me in a month, and that kind of stuff.
Well, I appreciate you all calling out the role of the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, and how important, they are in being able to steer these things. And they're in very, very high demand, and particularly to find a really, really good one out there, so important. A CISO who can span interacting with the board and interacting with deeper parts of the technology that are constantly evolving, and the staff and matters in between. You guys have been fantastic. I feel like I want to package you as a roadshow for educating boards and leadership teams in how to properly structure and communicate about cyber risks and the trade-offs, because it is boundless what you can spend, and that might not be enough, or you may be underinvesting and doing so from perhaps an uninformed basis of the choices that you're making. So with that, I will say thank you to each of you for your investment in education and participating with us at the Kelley School of Business. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.